Hello everyone. On this video, I'm going to talk about the duality of existence and non-existence and how duality works as a whole. So duality is based off perspective, and perspective determines a lot in this world. So I'm going to show you how your perspective can be skewed in this world of duality by using, the two dual terms, the two dual opposites, left and right. So I'll start by drawing a line, a long line. And on the left of this line is left, and on the right of this line is right. A person will be situated on the left, and someone will be on the right. The person on the left, right? Because left is the equal and opposite of right, and right is the equal and opposite of left. Without left, there is no right. Without the concept of left, the concept of right doesn't exist. Without right, left doesn't exist. So the person on the left, right? From his reference point, from his perspective, he is on the left. And this person is on the right, right? And everywhere in between, from his point of view, will be on the right, right? So when this person moves closer towards the right, you would think his perspective would change, right? He will go from being on the left to being on the right. But that's not how this works. That's not how duality works. When he goes from the left and moves closer towards the right, you'll realize that he's still on the left. No matter how close he goes towards the right, he will always be on the left. The closer he gets towards the right, it doesn't truly matter. He will always be on the left infinitely until he gets towards, his destination, the right. And even when he gets towards the right, you still end up realizing that even at the right, there's still something even further. Even when he gets here, you'll end up realizing there's something even further, and he'll always still be on the left. But from his perspective, if he stands here, right, he sees himself as on the left. But the person who's standing here at his starting point, if there's someone else standing at his starting point, he will always see him as on the right. The moment that person, the first person, left his starting position on the left, from then on, he has always been on the right. But from his very perspective, he will never see himself as on the right. He will always see himself as on the left side. He will always see that he's always standing on the left side. Compared to the right side, he's always on the left. From his perspective, he will always be on the left. But from the perspective of the person standing at his starting point, he's no longer on the left. He's always been on the right. The moment he left the starting point, he had left the left side a long time ago. And from then on, every point on this line, is considered the right. So when he was here, he was on the left. When he was here, he was on the left. When he was here, he was on the left. When he was here, he was on the left. When he was here, from his point of view, he was on the left. From the point of view of the person standing here, every single point, that he was on before was on the right. He never left the right position the moment he left the right, the moment he moved from the starting point, he had always been on the right. And this is how perspective works. And this is how, duality works. So let's start with a different example. Let's go with a different example. Small and large. Small is on the left, large is on the right. When someone who's small gets larger, right? From his vantage point, he will still be too small to be considered large. From his point of view, he's still small, and this is large. The right side is large. The left side is small. And when he moves closer towards, to large, the moment he gets, when he gets larger, he will still see himself as small. He will never see himself as large until he gets to that reference point, the end position. So the whole time he gets closer towards large, he will never truly see himself as large. Because from his perspective, he is still small compared to to his destination, large. But from the perspective of the person who started, who's still at his starting point, the moment he left, the moment that small left that starting point, he had always been large. The moment that, the object that was small left the starting point and got larger, it was no longer considered small, but large. And this is how perspective works. From one perspective, the object is large. From another perspective, it is small. And the closer you get towards large, you'll never truly see yourself get larger. Or you never see yourself as something that's large. You'll always see yourself as something that's small. Because you have a larger, as long as you see something larger than you, you never see yourself as large. And that's the problem with humans. We think we're small, tiny specks, but that's only compared to the universe. Compared to the universe, we are small specks. But compared to atoms and subatomic particles, we are extremely large. Not small. We are large. Perspective determines what's large and what's small. This works with age as well. When you're young, let's say the left side is young and the right side is old. A person who's young, when he slowly gets older, he will never see himself as old. He moves closer to old age, but when he looks at himself, he will still see himself as young. He moves closer to old age, but every time he looks at himself, he'll always see himself as young. He'll never see himself as old. But yet the person who was just born yesterday, or just today, right now, who's still at the starting position, the moment that person, the previous person, moved out of that starting position, he was already considered old. He was no longer young. So from the perspective of the person that's getting older, he is getting, he has not aged one bit. He has always been young. But from the perspective of someone who's just born, from the perspective of someone who's still at the starting point, that person was just getting older and older. He has never been young, since he moved out of the starting point. And this is how perspective works as well, with past and future. All dualities follow this perspective pattern. Perspective determines whether you're old or young. Perspective determines whether you exist or don't exist, as well. If you put existence on the left side, right, of this line, and non-existence on the right side of this line, as you move closer towards non-existence, you will still notice that you still exist. Even when you get to the extreme end of non-existence, right, all the way towards the right, you will still notice that you still exist. From your reference point, from your perspective, you never cease to exist. But from the perspective of the person who's on the left, at your beginning starting point, the moment you cross that starting point and started moving towards the left, the moment you started moving towards non-existence, you no longer exist. And this is how existence and non-existence work. From the perspective of someone who exists, you don't exist. But from your perspective, you have always existed. And this is how life works. This is how the past and the future works as well. The past is the equal opposite of the future. The closer you get towards the future, the more you realize you're still in the past. The closer you get towards the future, the more you realize you're still in the past. But the person who never left the starting point, all the way in the back, will never see you as the past, but its future. The person who's still here, you've always been in the future. But from your point of view, You've never been in the future. You've always been in the past. When you find, two dual opposites, they always follow this pattern. Cold and hot, young and old, before and after, tall and short, here and there, top and bottom, existence and non-existence, living and non-living, life and death. They all follow this pattern, So when you say that God doesn't exist, if you say that God doesn't exist, it's hard to really, it doesn't really make logical sense, because God's existence, because God is everything, right? God is both existence and non-existence. Because for existence to exist, which is on the left, non-existence must also exist. One doesn't make sense without the other as a reference point. It's only from perspective do you determine what exists or what doesn't. From the perspective of people who's on the left, anyone who's on the right doesn't exist. From the perspective of someone who's on the right, they've always existed. And this is how life works. The word existence and non-existence truly doesn't make logical sense when you're referencing God. Because God's existence, because God is omnipresent, it means God is everything. God is both existence and non-existence. From one point of view, right? You may think that humans are, exist, but we only exist from our point of view. From the point of view of God, you exist and you don't exist simultaneously. From the point of view of God, everything is God. And because everything is God, nothing exists but God. This is how life works. What you think doesn't exist only doesn't exist from your reference point. From its own reference point, it has always existed. In the past, people believed that cars did not exist, right? But now cars have always, now cars exist. So is it true that cars have never existed? No. The concept of a car exists within this world already. Although we haven't created a car, doesn't mean that, a car is impossible. As long as something is possible, it exists somewhere within this world. It exists somewhere, but just not within our reality. So existence and non-existence are illusions. God has always existed because God is everything. And because God is everything, God will always appear as if he doesn't exist. Because God is you. Since God is you, you'll never see God. You only see yourself. Because God is a car, you'll never see a car. You only see the car. Because God is a house, you never see the house. You only see, you never see God, you only see a house. Because God is the world, you never see God, you only see the world. Because God is everything, God becomes nothing. Because you never see God, you see everything else that God has created. This is why God says, I create all existences because only I exist. Because everything is God, only God truly exists. And since everything is God, non-existence is also God. Because what you call non-existence still exists. It only doesn't exist from your perspective. And perspective can be misleading. Just because it doesn't exist from your perspective does not mean it doesn't exist. Just because God doesn't exist from your perspective does not mean that God doesn't exist. What you call left is someone's right. What you call the future is someone's past. What you call large is someone's small. And this is how this world of duality works. That's it for this video. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.